But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field until the third day at even. If thy father at all miss me, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me that he might run to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the family. If he say thus, it is well, thy servant shall have peace. But if he be wroth, then be sure that evil is determined by him. Keep reading. Therefore thou shalt deal kindly with thy servant, for thou hast brought thy servant into a covenant of the Lord with thee. Notwithstanding, if there be in me iniquity, slay me thyself, for why shouldest thou bring me to thy fathers? Jonathan said, Far be it from thee, for if I knew certainly that evil were determined by my father to come upon thee, then would not I shall tell thee? Then David said unto Jonathan, Who shall tell me? Or what if thy father answered thee roughly? Jonathan said unto David, Come, let us go out in the field. And they went both of them into the field. Now I'm going to stop there. Okay, now you'll notice in verse 5 that there's a new moon.
Right.
Now, in Hebrew culture, here's a moon, right? Anybody see the moon? You got a new moon, right? Very new. But the calendar that the Jewish people use is based on the moon. Okay?
Right.
And I want to read this. I gave a handout out to you. I just want to read some of this. In Numbers 10:10 stresses the importance in Israelite religious observance of the new moon. It's called Rosh Chodesh. Beginning in the month of your new moons, you shall blow with the trumpets over your burnt offerings. In Numbers 28:11, the beginning of the month meant the appearance of a new moon. And in Exodus 12:2, this month is to you. As the first, the beginning of each Jewish month was signaled to the communities of Israel and beyond by fires lit on the mountaintops. Now, this is something interesting. During the time of the full moon, not everybody knew when the full moon was happening, because if it was clouded over, you didn't know the moon was there.
Right.
So what the priest would do, they would light fires on hills, different hills around the country, to know that it was time for festival. Okay? They would have a festival, a holiday at every full new moon. Okay? The new moon signifies the start of every Jewish month and is considered an important date and minor holiday in the Hebrew calendar. The modern form of the calendar is based on a lunar solar calendar. Okay, now God's original calendar was not based on the lunar solar calendar, because I have a copy of the book of an Enoch calendar made by Enoch. Now, it was totally a lunar calendar. Now, you'll find the Chinese use a solar lunar calendar. You find the Islams use just a lunar calendar. And then the calendar we use, the Gregorian calendar, is based on the sun. Now, this has something to do with the reason I'm telling you all this is that I have run into people that are trying to put dates to things. And they're trying to use the Jewish calendar that we have today to put dates to things. But every 7 years they add an extra month to their calendar because their calendar is inaccurate and loses time. Now, I got a question for you. If God creates a calendar, is it inaccurate? Does it lose time?
No.
I don't think so either, so I think they're going by the wrong calendar. So you can't set dates. I don't think Jesus wanted it that way. He wants to confuse people about dates, so when people say they can set dates, they can't, because what calendar are you going by? I mean, are you going by the Gregorian calendar? Or are you going by here we got the Hillel calendar, we got the Enoch calendar, we got the Islamic calendar, we got the Chinese calendar. Which one do you want to go by? Okay, now, the reason I was stressing that, though, is that the new moons during the time of David, though, were very, very important, and they would get together with their families and sacrifice, and they would have fellowship, and they would eat. Okay? It also sacrificed for sins. Okay, so let's go back to our scriptures where we were reading. Now, all Jewish holidays were determined by the moon cycles, just like the Jewish calendar. And during the new moon feast, sacrifices were made, and the head of each tribe were gathered together. At this time, David decides to hide in the field for 3 days because he's afraid that Saul's going to kill him.
Right.
So he figures out this way with Jonathan to figure this thing out. Jonathan agrees to whatever is best for David. Okay?
Right.
Now in verse 6 you'll see it says, so if Saul asked about David, Jonathan was going to tell Saul that David wanted to be with his family during the feast days. Again, I see something wrong with David and Jonathan. Second time we've seen him lying about things. Last week we found out he lied to the priest, and all the priests they hadn't got killed yet, but they will.
Right.
It was because of his lies. Now, I'm not saying that this it actually saved David, but why make up lies? That's my question.
Right.
What do y'all think about lying? Do you think it's okay to tell a little lie to make sure that nobody gets their feelings hurt, or you know?
No, but we have that tendency to do so.
We do. I mean, and especially if you're going to get killed.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
it's just a little white
Well,
lie.
it just reminds us,
It was a
sadly,
little white lie and a little
that-
blue lie.
man's thoughts are evil continually.
Yep.
And it's the flesh is wanting to rise up and get attention and justify itself.
Yep.
And make provisions for itself and weasel out of things.
And that's a good word, weaseling out of things. I think when you're lying and you're trying to weasel out of something, you're afraid something's going to happen that don't happen. That's another thing. Lying is a direct cause of worry. Because you're trying to keep something from happening by a lie. Okay? Now, sometimes it's just better, I've said this before, it's just better to keep your mouth shut. You know? And don't say nothing. If you have to lie, just don't say nothing. Now, if Saul, in verse 7, David says, if Saul was okay with this, David could rest at ease. But if Saul was angry, David knew Saul was going to plot against him. Okay?
Right.
Now, you'll note, let's look at verse 8 real quick. Now, it says, therefore thou shalt deal kindly with... How does David refer to himself?
Servant.
Your servant.
He refers to himself as a servant of Jonathan. He still has not assumed his kingship, even though he's been anointed, and he is king, but he's not king, because Saul is king, right?
Exactly. And
Now-
not an overstep.
Yeah, and there's not room for two kings. It's just like in a church world, there's always going to be somebody who leads and somebody who follows, you know, and even the leader has to follow somebody,
Amen.
you know. Okay. Then he goes on to say, if there be, he told Jonathan that they were in covenant together. Sister Norma talked about covenant last week, and that Hebrew word is berit. I think I'm saying that right, B-E-R-I-T. And it means a cutting or a league. Now, Jonathan and David had made a covenant together. And David says that if you find any iniquity in me, and that word iniquity is awan, A-W-O-N in Hebrew, and it means mischief, perversity, or evil. If you find that I'm evil, kill me right now and don't take me to your father to have him kill me.
Right.
That's what he says. You kill me if you think I'm
If you
evil.
think I'm so bad, go ahead and do it now.
And of course, Jonathan says, be it far from thee. And also, I had to look up that word because that's what it says in the King James. But in the original version, it says Halil. Halil means God forbid. Okay? Halil means God forbid. And that's what he said. He did not say, be it far from me. Even that says it in the King James. But he said, God forbid. You know, if I knew Dad was plotting against you, I would tell you. Okay? Now here comes in verse 10. It says, how are we going to get word back to you? How Saul reacts since you're not going to be there. And so what they did, they went into the field. And that gets us to this section number 3 of our lesson. Verse 12. Right? You ready? Jonathan said unto David, O Lord God of Israel, when I have sounded my father about tomorrow, any time or the third day, behold, if there be good toward David, and I then send thee not unto thee, show it to thee. Then the Lord do so, and much more to Jonathan. But if it please my father to do evil, then I will show it to thee, and send thee away, that thou mayest go in peace. The Lord be with thee, as he has been with my father. And thou shalt not only, while yet I live, show me the kindness of the Lord, that I die not. But also thou shalt not cut off thy kindness from my house forever. No, not when the Lord hath cut off the enemies of David, every one of them, from the face of the earth. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, Let the Lord even require it at the hand of David's enemies. And Jonathan caused David to swear again because he loved him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. Okay. Now in verse 12, Jonathan says, O Lord God of Israel, when I have sounded to my father. That's what it says in the King James. I had to look up that word because I don't know, it seems so foreign to me reading it. But the word there is Hagar, and it means to find out. In other words, he was going to go find out from his dad what he felt about David, And he was going to try to help him. Now, in verse 13, I had a hard time even deciphering this in the King James because I thought it was in Spanish when I was reading it because it's all backwards. So I had to translate it back into English. If my father plans evil against you and I fail to tell you, and you are harmed, may God have his way with me. And that's my paraphrase. And may God be with you as he was with my dad. As long as we live, let us show kindness to the Lord. Without the kindness of the Lord, I'd be dead. Can we say that? Without the kindness of the Lord, I would be dead.
Amen.
That's what David said. Okay. As long as we live and show kindness to the Lord, okay? Not only do I need God's kindness, this is David talking, I need your kindness, not only to me, but also to my house as well. God will cut off all the enemies of David from the face of the earth. And that word cut off is kerat, which means consumed or destroyed. Now, I also want you to notice it says in verse 15, But thou also shalt cut off thy kindness from my house forever. This was a covenant of kindness between two people. And in verse 16 it says, Let the Lord require it. Now, Jonathan was saying that when David conquers his enemies, where it says here, let the Lord even require it at the hand of David's enemies. I had to ask myself, require what? What does he require?
Right.
And after I studied it and studied it and studied it, I found out what he was saying is that if David says, if I conquer anybody, they have to be friends with you too.
Right.
The covenant is between me and Jonathan, and if my enemies, if I conquer them, the enemies have to become friends with you. That's a pretty good deal.
That is a really good deal.
I mean, let's talk about it.
But I mean, it's like even, when you decide to come into a covenant with the Lord, it's basically the same thing. Whoever he's against, you're against. Whoever he's with, you're with.
Yeah. And it's that way today. Our nation's torn apart because we're not following God.
Exactly.
We're following whatever we think.
Exactly.
I'm talking about the media too.
Right.
We have to be very careful what we think and what we say. And who we make covenant with. Oh, making covenant with things.
That's true.
Okay, that brings us to verse 18. A new moon plan. Back to our new moon, right? It says, Then Jonathan said unto David, Tomorrow is the new moon, and thou shalt be missed, because thy seat will be empty. And when thou hast stayed 3 days, then thou shalt go down quickly and come to the place where thou didst hide thyself when business was in hand, and shalt remain by the same stone of Ezel. And I will shoot 3 arrows on the side thereof, as though I shot at a mark. Behold, I will send a lad, saying, Go out, find the arrows. If I expressly say to the Lord, the lad, Behold, the arrows on this side of thee, then thou shalt come, for there is peace to thee, and no hurt, as the Lord liveth. But if I say thus unto the young man, Behold, the arrows are beyond thee, go thy way, for the Lord hath sent thee away. As touching the matter which thou and I have spoken of, behold, the Lord be between thee and me forever. Okay. So they make a plan, right?
Right.
They take an oath, and they make a double bond together as friends. They reiterate it again. And they say, Go hide at a place called Ezel. Now, the Ezel was the stone in the way. It was a place that it was a marker, but there was caves and stuff you could hide in. So he was hiding in the clefts of these rocks. That was the plan. Go hide in the clefts of the rocks. Wait 3 days there, and then Jonathan was going to take a lad, and he would shoot the arrows either on one side of him or beyond him. If it was on the one side, everything was okay. You could come back without my father trying to kill you. But if I shoot him past you, it's not good. Right?
Right.
Now, one thing else he does, after he says this, Jonathan reminds David of the covenant that's with him. Apparently, this covenant was a very important covenant between friends. I don't know if I've ever had a friend as close as Jonathan was to David, other than my wife, you know. But they were very, very close. Okay, now that brings us to lesson number 5. I'm going to move along. The 13th, 14th, 15th attempts to slay David. Verse 24. So David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon was come, the king sat down to eat meat. The king sat upon his seat, and as at other times, even upon a seat by the wall. Jonathan arose, and Abner sat by Saul's side, and David's place was empty. Nevertheless, Saul spake not anything that day, for he thought something hath befallen him. He is not clean. Surely he is not clean. And it came to pass that the morrow, which was the 2nd day of the month, that David's place was empty, and Saul said unto Jonathan his son, Wherefore cometh not the son of Jesse to me, neither yesterday nor today? Jonathan answered Saul and said, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. And he said, Let me go, I pray thee, for my family has a sacrifice in the city, and my brother, he has commanded me to be there. Now if I have found favor in thine eyes, let me get away, I pray thee, and see my brother, and therefore he cometh not to the king's table. I'm going to stop there. Now, I always think it's easy. One of the other things I noticed about this is that even when they made the decision to lie to Saul, Jonathan changed it up even a little bit more. He says, your brother, his brother told him to come.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something, parents. Can you tell when your kids are lying to you?
Yes. Yeah, usually. Yeah.
Do you think Saul knew that Jonathan was lying?
I had a friend that was with the sheriff's department in the narcotics division, and when they do interrogation, they ask someone, they watch their expression, and they ask them a question that they know they're going to tell the truth on, and they watch their expression, and then they ask them just a random thing that they know they're going to lie about, and they watch their expression, and then they go back to the original questions they were asked, and then when they're lying, their same expression copycats what they did on the fake one.
Yeah. You'll never get anywhere with lying. I don't know why I'm reiterating this so much, but I just keep seeing it over and over where people that are supposedly godly people lie.
But
And it's
when
not
you,
good.
but when you tell a lie, you have to remember who you told it to and what you told them.
Well, right here, if Saul had went to David and said, Who asked you to go to your parents' house? He would have said, My dad.
Right.
And he would say, Jonathan told me it was your brother.
Uh-huh.
Right.
You know.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to get David in trouble. He's the hero in this story. But I keep finding things that I know I myself have lied before. How many people in here have lied before? Yeah, I was going to say you're all liars, and that's how you have lied. But as Christians, we need to strive not to lie.
Amen.
Not to lie. We don't need to lie at all. None.
That's right. That's what.
Brother Keith, you know, it just reminds us also that God uses imperfect people. We look
Yes.
through all the Bible and the Old Testament most especially, and you can find character flaws in all the people that God used, but God still used them.
Absolutely. And He made them better people.
And we as humans want to just remember the bad things about the one bad mistake. Of course, with David, you know, everybody loves Bathsheba. But, you know, it says that he was a man after God's own heart, and that's how come God continued to use him.
Amen. Now, I like the way this is written and the way it rolls out is that they started to have this feast. You know, they have the feast, and the king comes and he sits in his chair, And, Jonathan goes on one side, and then Abner sits on the other side. Now, this reminded me of a movie. I know I bring up movies, but I like Robin Hood.
Uh-huh.
And you'll notice that the sheriff of Nottingham is here in this story of David. Is that this guy, Abner, is his chief right hand of Saul. Okay? He's the headman, like the sheriff of Nottingham. And he takes his seat beside Saul. So we got an evil king, and you got the evil sheriff. Same scenario in Robin Hood. Now, it talks about David being unclean. Now, later on, we're going to find out there's a lot of things that if you got unclean, you can't come to these ceremonies. You have to be clean. One thing, you can't be with a woman for the last 3 days. Okay? Even your wife. The other thing is you can't touch dead bodies. Because you have to go to the priest and be cleansed for 7 days if you touch a dead body. So, and that's another reason I've been telling people, you can't become Jews that are Christians. Because if you do, every time you touch a dead body, you got to go to Jerusalem to find a priest, and there's not one there. So, nonetheless. Okay. So, they held the festival for 2 days. And the reason they had the festival for 2 days, I was mentioning it earlier about the fires that are put on the hills, right? Sometimes the enemies would go and put the fires out so that people couldn't have their festivals. Because they worship Baal God, and you're worshiping the Hebrew God.
Right.
So they're trying to stop the worship of God, basically. So they'll put the fires out so nobody will know the moon has showed up. But so they do it for 2 days. That way the fires can be relit as the enemy puts them out. Of course, David's a no-show on the second time around. He's a no-show. And then we find in verse 29. Let's see, in verse 30. Let's go to verse 30. I hadn't read it yet. I've got a few more minutes. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. And he said unto him, Thou son of the perverse, rebellious woman, do not I know that thou hast chosen the son of Jesse to thine own confusion, unto the confusion of his mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives upon the ground, thou shalt not be established, nor thy kingdom. Wherefore now send and fetch him unto me, for he shall surely die. And Jonathan answered Saul his father and said unto him, Wherefore shall he be slain, and what has he done? Okay, we'll stop there. Now, Saul gets really, really angry with his son, and apparently gets mad at his wife as well. Now, I
gotta blame somebody.
He blamed his wife for the birth of his son, I think. These words here, perverse is awa in Hebrew, and it means wicked or crooked, talking about his wife. And rebellious is hoshet, which means, or confusion, I should say. Confusion is hoshet, which means shame. And of course, nakedness is irwa, which means disgrace and shame. And let me rephrase what he said to Jonathan. He says, You were born of an evil woman because you have chosen David, and you will be brought to shame, and your mother too. That's what he says. And I'm sure those are Hebrew curse words. I mean, if we talk about our mothers, somebody else's mother, even though it's his own wife. Very interesting words, I thought. Now, Saul's showing his true fear in verse 31. And what is his true fear? Can anybody decipher what his true fear is? Saul has a true fear.
That David's going to be king.
What?
David's going to be king.
David's going to be king, and Jonathan's not going to get the kingship. That's why he was so upset. He said, You'll never be heir to the throne as long as David lives. And in some ways, that was a true statement. But then in verse 32, I can see Jonathan saying, Come on, Dad, why should we kill my best friend? And what has he done? Okay, and at that point, we're going to stop. Next week, we're going to start up the next lesson in verse 33 of chapter 20. So, y'all keep reading your Bibles.
boy or what?
Hey,
I'm telling
what's the
you.
matter, man?
Surely not. I think Mimi thinks
Mimi's not being nice, huh? Oh.
See, you're making her cry too.
Hello? Where's your sister? Oh. Hey, how you doing?
Just fine. How about yourself?
Good to see you. Why, you looking sharp yourself. Come on.
How you doing?
No, and no.
Kathy, how you doing? I'm all right.
Is he staying right here? Let's see, you think we could transfer?